the Forged and Unbroken podcast.
I'm going to do this totally backwards.
Okay.
Start with retirement in mind. How long is it that you have now been retired?
Just over a year and a half, I guess.
Is it a year and a half now?
Actually, a little bit longer than that. I retired March 22, so it's actually it's almost 2 years.
Yeah, you're coming up on 2 years. Wow. Damn.
Time flies.
Yeah, really. What does that look like? I remember hearing about motorcycles.
Yeah.
What do the days
do a lot
look
more
like
riding.
Yeah.
A lot more riding on the bike. It's nice. It's nice not having a schedule so you can get up and go do whatever you want.
Yeah.
And some people probably think I'm odd, but I enjoy doing the stuff around the house, doing stuff out in the yard, and
That's awesome.
splitting wood and all that kind of stuff that I haven't been working on.
I tell you, getting outside, I feel like a better person.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
I do too. It's probably the biggest change was, which people don't talk about, or I haven't heard people talk about it much, is the first 6 months you feel kind of odd because you just walked out the door, so you don't belong, so to speak, with the folks that are working in the station.
Yeah, interesting.
But you're not one of the old retired guys where you're talking about the good old days, because the good old days were last week. So it was like it took me about 6 months to really kind of get settled into that mindset of being retired.
Yeah, this is actually real.
Yeah, I guess if you were somebody who was looking to leave and you just wanted to get out, it'd be different.
Yeah.
Walking away where, I really love the job and still enjoy doing it. When you leave, that was that transition. Took a little time to mentally get in the mindset of being retired. And so
I remember you were also very dedicated to the idea of leaving on a good note.
Yes.
Because not so many, but there are definitely a certain type of person that they'll leave and it's on maybe bad terms. There's a lot of naysaying, and for whatever that situation may have been to them, it could have been very personal. But for you said, I want to leave on a love in this job and not be disgruntled. And I'm paraphrasing here, but I remember I really appreciated that sentiment of loving the job on the way out the door still and feeling passionate about it.
That came, and I think I mentioned it came from Captain Lore years ago when he retired, and I asked him why he retired when he did, and he said, because I still love the job. Yeah. And I carried that with me, and I was like, you know what? Yeah, I really don't want to leave, so that when people come up to me and ask me, hey, something about the fire department, I go, man, that's terrible. They do this. I wanted to walk out and go, man, that's the greatest job in the world. Yeah. But it does make it hard to walk out on your last day because it's like leaving the carnival before they close. So.
How many years was it total?
40 and 2 months.
40 and 2 months.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm not even 40 years old yet, and you spent that much time in the fire service. And then were you a volunteer before that as well?
Yeah, I started volunteering in 78.
Wow.
So you had another 4 years to that.
Yeah. Man, that's incredible. And, we're going to hit this one incident specifically. We're going to really tie into that. You did your 4 years of volunteer time, and then you were hired in 82, 83? 82. Just a quick snapshot of just differences. I remember when you were talking about one of your incidents, you guys are still using elephant trunk BAs, I think when I went through Fire One, there were some of the companies that, some of the volunteers that I was going through Fire One with when I started volunteering, and there was one or two that had the old elephant trunk still in the early 2000s. But what are some of those things that stick out to you? I mean, that's 4 decades worth of change.
BA changes, as you mentioned. Interestingly enough, one of the things that kind of COVID reminded me of was going on calls and people getting used to wearing masks on a call. Yeah. The N95s. Reminded me of back when we started in about 85 when we had to start wearing gloves, which everybody wears gloves on a medical call now. But actually before 85, we didn't wear gloves on medical calls. You wore them on OB calls. Most of the gloves were in the OB kits. We didn't have boxes of gloves all over the ambulance.
That was the only time.
Wow. It was getting folks to remember to put gloves on. Yeah. And that was because of the AIDS epidemic starting.
Oh, yeah.
And so that was a that was kind of a big change. And it reminded me back of that when people were like, oh, yeah, I got to remember to put a mask on. We're going in. And it was the same kind of thing of, oh, got to remember to put gloves on, you know, people reminded. So, but those kind of things, some of them are little, you know, the change in defibrillators. And it was pretty incredible. We used to men in great batch, which weighed about probably 35, 40 pounds. Big thing looked like a suitcase, and now they've got them. You know, AEDs are small. Even the datascopes and everything is reduced in that. Fire-wise,
the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Fire-wise was kind of interesting because being in that long, you actually saw what looked like a wave, and it would go up and down. You would see things, tactics come into play, and I'll use the transitional attack, as people call it. Everybody's got their own term. When I first came in 78, 79, actually that was what we were trained. And there's actually, if you look I've got a page that somebody got a hold of, copied out of one of the IFSTA manuals that talks about the technique. And that's what we used. You would hit it quick from the outside and go in. And then somewhere it transitioned around the 90s, it seemed to really make the final transition to everything's inside. You never put a line through a window for whatever reason, or through a door. You had to go in first. And now we've gone back to what everybody thinks is new. But really it's something that was 40 years ago. That was the process. Now, today, it's if you will, it's science backed.
Yes. Yeah.
In the 70s, it was practical backed. People realized, you know what, if we do a quick knock before we go in, it's easier on us when we go in. Yeah, right. Now the science is showing that, that's what happened, but now we have the science to understand why that effect was taken. But so those types of things were kind of interesting, how we've gone. We go back and forth, and there's always the smooth bore fog argument nozzle thing that's going to go back and forth, I'm sure, for the next century or so. Yeah. So it's like Yankees and Red Sox. You gotta draw your line in the sand and plant your flag. There you go. So 1982, you get hired, you're going through the academy, and you get assigned to where? Station 7.
So you're right in downtown Columbia, where Meriwether Post Pavilion is. Right. Companies back then, you were riding, what, 2?
Station 7 had 3 because we were the only county station at the time. Oh, okay. So we had 3 on the engine or truck. We were what we call nowadays, we call it shared. Back then, we just whatever gets called first.
Gotcha. Yeah. First out the door.
Right. So we had an engine and a truck, and it was minimum staffing was 3 on for the fire crew and 2 on the ambulance. Okay. Occasionally, we would have 6 people working, and so we would have a 4-person engine company or truck company, but the minimum was 3 at that station. There were stations, Clarksville, a lot of the other outlying stations, the minimums were 2 on the engine and 2 on the ambulance. Gotcha. So you would often have 2-person engine companies.
Yeah. And back then you had more, we'll say volunteer presence, but also were there part-time people or like day work essentially?
Part-time at some of the stations, but you would have more volunteer activity noticeable than the part-time.
Yeah, and now we are looking at minimum staffing of 4 on all suppression, an ALS paramedic unit, a presence in every station. Right. We're at, 14 stations with, more slated on the way. So just over the course of that 40 years, it's taken its changes for sure. Yes. There's been growing pains and hurdles with that, but for sure. Now, date in question. You gave dispatch for is it townhouse fire?
Yeah, middle of the group townhouse. Mm-hmm. Vantage Point Road, 5645, Vantage Point Road. Yeah. That's and at that time, that was a 3-engine, 1-truck response. Oh, okay. If the company had an ambulance in service at the time, not on another call, they would respond. It wasn't specifically part of the assignment to have an ambulance. Okay. So on that day, truck was out of service at 7, so it was the engine, and then with 3, and myself and a volunteer medic on 75.
Okay, so you were on the ambo.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. And we're looking at, 18 months in on the career side of things?
At that time, no, 6 months.
Oh, 6 months.
I just graduated.
Oh,
actually,
okay, 6 months out in the field. Okay.
Yeah, I just graduated actually 3 weeks before that.
Oh,
so,
wow.
Yeah, June 24th was our academy graduation, and this was July 20th.
Wow, okay.
82.
So you're fresh.
Yes.
You're very fresh. Okay. And Vantage Point, I mean, that's for 7. That's a first due
Yes.
fire.
Yep.
You know, older. Well, I mean, now to me, it's a little bit older, more of the original part of downtown Columbia. But back then, I mean, that was probably newer construction, right?
Yeah, that was newer. They were built probably. That part was probably built mid to late 70s, so they weren't that old.
Yeah. Okay. And cruiser going on scene, middle of the row.
And middle of the group, townhouse 72 was the first engine on the scene, and it was 2 guys. Two on the line going in from the first engine to the. They went in. It was basement fire, and we pulled in not long behind 72, same time as what 92 got on the scene.
Okay.
So, because I had a volunteer medic on the ambulance, she stayed with the medic unit, and the officer off 72 assigned me with a volunteer off of 92.
Okay.
So, I don't know how far you want me to step through this.
Oh man, you
just roll.
You can start piecing this apart. Like
Interrupt me if you got a question.
Yeah, please. Yeah,
all right,
okay,
that works. So 72's crew goes in, 2 go in the front door, and they go down to the basement interior stairs along the Bravo side. The doors on the Bravo side of the townhouse. They go down those stairs. We weren't far behind them. We were assigned, myself and Mike McKeever, who was off of 92. We were assigned to go to the second floor, search and ventilate. So we went to the Bravo, again, same side stairs, go up the Bravo side over top of the basement stairs. Mm-hmm. Went up to the second floor, and as we got in, we did the first room at the top of the stairs. We were heading down toward the Delta side, and we went to the rear room on that side and started searching that room. Unbeknownst to us, there actually was a crew that had been assigned to the second floor on the Alpha side.
Okay.
So we didn't know then that they were there. For those who are not familiar, 40 years ago, there was one portable radio on each piece, and the officer would have that. So our officer is outside because he's the incident commander. He was outside with the radio, so none of the people inside the building, none of the crews inside the building have radios. So that'll help people understand some of this.
For sure.
Some of this so we get to the second floor, so we don't know that there's a crew now. At some point, came in behind us and went to the Alpha side rooms on the second floor. We did the first room at the top of the stairs, go to toward the Delta side, so we're back in quadrant 3, searching the room. And back then, again, no radios. The way you determine when you're going to ventilate is you kind of did the old count on your fingers thing, 1,000. Do you think that they've got a line on the fire that we can open the windows? That's how it was done. Unless there was someone outside, excuse me, who could give you some verbal indication. Okay. Which there wasn't. So
even at that time, though, you are still loosely coordinating ventilation. It's not the smash as you search type mentality.
No, and I won't say that wasn't done.
Yeah. Still
in the fire service and still in Harry County. Our officer was more strict on that kind of thing. It was retired Chief Frank.
Gotcha.
More strict on orderly operations.
Okay.
So we did calculate when we would ventilate and wouldn't just take out windows just to take out windows.
Yeah, okay, that's neat.
Again, one of those things that's kind of like it evolved. It actually did exist at one time, just not universally.
Sure.
So we get back in there. when we got into the quadrant 3 room, and also back up here a second, the lady is a collector, or as we like to like to say instead of saying hoarding, but she collected a lot of stuff.
Gotcha.
And so there was a lot of obstructions and things in the room, a lot of stuff packed in there. So we get in there. As we got in the room and we're searching the room, excuse me, noticed that the heat was going up. When we went up the stairs and got down the hallway, it was warm. I mean, just not even uncomfortably warm. It was just warm, light warm. So when we got back in that last room and we started searching, noticed it going up a little bit. We did our kind of, okay, I think they got the line on the fire now. We took out the window. When we took out the window on the rear of the building, within seconds, the heat went from warm to hot. I mean, in no time at all, just in seconds. And I was like, something's not right. So went back. I told my partner, I said, when he got to the window, I said, see if you can get somebody's attention. I said, it's getting hot in here. We're going to need a ladder out here. I don't think we're going to make it back. Let me go check. So he goes, I left him at the window. I went back to the doorway. When I got to the doorway and looked down the hallway, it was just orange. There was no defined flames or anything. It was just all just orange.
Blowtorch.
So I tried to close the door, and because she's a hoarder, she had stuff everywhere, and it was blocking the door. And I worked on the door, and I just couldn't get the door closed. And kind of along the same lines of the, vent under search now and isolate. Back then, I was doing that for protection, not because we had come in, window side.
Right.
So worked on the door, couldn't get the door shut. I go back to the window, excuse me. When I get back to the window, Mike's gone, and I don't know where he is. So also add in another tidbit. The townhouse is 2 stories from the front, 3 stories from the rear. We did not know that. Talk about 360s later on, but we didn't know that. Nobody had done a 360 to the building. We didn't know that it was 3 stories to the rear, 2 to the front. We also did not know that there was a deck on level 1, which would have been 1 below us. So to us, once the realization that we are 3 stories up comes to us, we don't know that there's an intermediate level that we could get to, hang and drop from the window, that kind of thing.
Okay.
I don't want to spoil the rest where it sort of fit in. Go ahead.
So you said, well, I guess hindsight being what it is, it was a basement fire, but you did not know at the time it was in the basement? Or did the crews know it was in the basement? We did. The crew went down the basement. And actually, I told you about our side of it when the heat started going. Yeah.
At the approximate same time that we opened the window, and this is part of the investigation, the fire investigation, at the approximate same time that we opened the window, the fire had been burning. Again, she had a lot of stuff in the basement. It had been burning underneath of the kitchen floor. So 3 things came together. At the time that the crew that went to the basement hit the fire burned through the kitchen floor. It was just about ready to go, and it went through the floor just as they went to hit the fire. That was also approximately the same time we were opening the window. And then their line burned through at the top of the stairs.
Oh, wow.
So they lost water. So now we kind of gave the fire just a little bit of a push. It burned through the kitchen floor. They lost water so they can continue the fire extinguishment. So now you had the fire uncontrolled, and we just created a chimney.
Yeah.
And as was referred back then, the chimney effect.
Yeah.
Now we refer to it as a flow path. Same thing. But in some respects, I think when I refer to it as a chimney effect, which we did back then, it gives a better picture, too, to people as to where you are in this thing. We were in the chimney.
Yeah.
And so
you were on the second floor, and you said Mike was...
So Mike's at the window. So I tried to close the door to cut it off. Couldn't get the door closed. Go back to the window. And how long I was at the door trying to work on that, I don't know. apparently long enough for somebody to come around the back of the building. Chief Heller was actually the first one to notice notice Mike signaling out the second floor window, and he yelled for them to bring a ladder around back. In the time that I was working that door, they had gotten a ladder around back, and gotten it up on the deck. There was no stairs to the deck. That's another point I'll touch on about being prepared with ladders, is Howard Massey, great job. He had brought, and I don't know if it was by luck or by conscious decision, but he brought a roof ladder. So he threw that to the balcony or to the deck, climbed it, pulled it up, and threw it a second time to the second floor.
Okay.
So Mike had gone out as soon as the ladder hit. Mike had gone out. When I got to the window, Mike's gone. Mm-hmm. I don't know if Mike went out or if Mike, because they threw the ladder, was coming back into the room to tell me, hey, the ladder's there.
Yeah.
So I went to the window. Two things to give you a visual of this without having the ability to show a picture. Yeah. There's smoke coming out of the window, heavy smoke coming out of the window that we're in. Mm-hmm. There's also smoke coming out of the slider on the first floor, on the deck below us. So when you look down, you can't see anything looking down. There's the obstruction of the smoke, so we couldn't tell that there was a deck there. The realization that there was a deck there was when the ladder was thrown.
Okay.
And seeing the hooks on the ladder, I'm realizing it didn't make it from the ground here. That was the realization that there's a deck. But the other thing that this...
it's amazing to me, though, that in that moment you had the realization and the mindset to be able to identify that, though.
It's interesting. It's almost interesting when things that you don't think would jump out to you.
Yeah.
That stuck in my mind. I saw hooks.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things, for whatever reason, it stuck in my mind that there's hooks on this ladder. And I'm on the second floor. Yeah. Why? I'd love to tell you it was a conscious thought.
Yeah.
But it just jumped in my mind. There's hooks, and I'm on the second floor. It can't make it here.
Yeah.
And so the other thing that the smoke also had a problem with. I normally wear glasses, as you can see. Mm-hmm. Nobody else can. You can see that I wear glasses. So back then we didn't have inserts in our face pieces. So my vision's somewhat limited. I'm not a blind person, but 3 stories down to the ground, everybody's just a blur. So I can't tell if Mike's one of the people on the ground or not. Mm. So I'm calling out, where's Mike? And everybody's motioning to me with their hands and yelling, come down. And I'm asking, where's Mike? Of course, I have BA on, so they're not hearing anything. Yeah. They're just seeing a guy at a window.
Right.
So the answer I needed to hear, I didn't get.
Sure.
And so my thought was Mike's still inside, and I'm not going to leave Mike. So I went back through the room, did a search of the room, and I don't know how long it took me. I was climbing over all kinds of stuff. It was a mess. So it probably took me a little bit.
Yeah.
I came back to the window, same thing, same question. Where's Mike? And I get the same response, just come down. Nobody's telling me anything. And I was like, that's not the answer I need to hear. I need to know where Mike is. So I wasn't going to leave Mike up there. Went through a second time, same thing, same response. And then I went a third time. And on the third time going through there, I was definitely moving slower. I knew I was getting burned. I made it through the room. I got back to the window, and same question. But when I got the answer, it was one of those ones where, I sat there for a couple seconds and just thought, can I make it another time? And I honestly didn't believe I would survive going through that room one more time. I knew I was burned. I could tell from the feel that I was burned bad. I didn't know how bad at the time.
Okay.
But I knew I was burned bad. My breathing apparatus at this point, the shoulder straps had burned through, and it was hanging down from the waist strap. So there was a lot of indications to me of how hot this was in the room. And so I felt I'd given it the best effort I could. And so I decided to go down. Mm-hmm. One thing I will point out is when you practice bailouts, you got to practice unconventional means of bailing out. I told you it was a roof ladder thrown to the second floor. Well, a 14-foot roof ladder overshoots the window. So the ladder was actually to the left of the window and above the window. So the ability to get out and get on the ladder wasn't. I actually really didn't give that a thought. I just looked at the ladder and went, and I just reached out and I went down the ladder, hand over hand on the backside of the ladder.
Okay.
Because to me, that was just the quickest and easiest way to get out and down the ladder. I would encourage folks to practice that because that's a very realistic scenario in my mind after having been through it, that everything isn't the exact same length as our ladders. And sometimes they're going to overshoot, sometimes they're going to undershoot. Just as important as being able to get to a ladder that's a foot below the window, which I don't know how many people practice that, but that's something worthwhile too, is getting to a ladder that's above the window. So I came down the ladder, hand over hand, get down to the deck, went down the second ladder, normal. Yeah. So conventional.
Right.
And got down to the ground. When I got to the ground, that's when I found out that Mike was down.
Okay.
So that was a big load off of me because that was wearing on me that,
Sure.
I left him. I didn't feel like I abandoned him, but I did. You just never want to leave your partner behind.
Yeah.
So I got down to the ground. That was a big relief to find out that he had made it out. I also insert. I've had people ask me, "Well, were you angry at him that he left as soon as he got there?" And I said no. A couple reasons. One, that was actually his first working fire that he'd ever been on. So there's just that in addition to the conditions that we're in. As well, in order for him, just like I mentioned that people couldn't hear me because I had BA on, he realized nobody could hear him.
Yeah.
And so he popped his BA up so that he could yell and they could hear him. The positive side was they now knew what was going on and they needed help. He was in trouble. But the downside was he also inhaled some superheated gases and had some tracheal burns and things. He was tubed for a while when we were in the hospital together.
Oh, wow.
So he was going through some issues too. It wasn't like he could have just popped his face piece back on and gone and found me in the building. So no, I had no concerns. He did what he needed to do at the time, and if I put myself, which I think is very important that we need to understand, is we always have to make sure that we view what a person's actions are through their level of experience and not through ours. And I used to have to tell myself that all through my years in the department when I get a rookie on the shift or something like that, is I can't expect them to know what I know because I've been here 40 years. I need to recognize that and help them understand. So
I appreciate that.
So getting back on track there. So get down. In the meantime, the crew on the Alpha side had bailed out the front into a bunch of bushes, so they only had one floor to go, and they had some soft landing areas. So, but they bailed out the front, and the crew in the basement had exited out a slider in the basement, which I'll touch on later about access to basement fires a little bit, some of the things that we changed in the department after that. But so they were able to go out the rear side trolley to get out of the basement. And so operationally, that'd cover your operations side of the Mayday, if you will.
Okay.
One of the things kind of interesting, people, I said we didn't have radios. And it's interesting, I got into a conversation one day related to that. People were asking about, why would firefighters throw helmets out the window? And you have to understand the reason they did that was if you saw a helmet on the ground, you knew somebody above you was in trouble because back then they didn't have radios. That was a signal that a firefighter was in trouble. Yeah. Back before radios. So
the culture surrounding Mayday was probably entirely different.
Yeah, we didn't actually. Mayday wasn't even a term in the fire service.
Oh, okay.
Back then, so you were just in trouble. Emergency, man down, those kind of things. We didn't use the term Mayday back then. So this was a Mayday before there were Maydays. There was no Mayday policy. There was no, how you handle that. It was if somebody's in trouble, you handled it like any other rescue. Yeah.
You're either with an officer that might have that one radio, and if you're not with that person, you're yelling to another person. Face-to-face communications are out the window, or that's where the helmet comes into play. You're throwing the helmet out the window.
Correct.
These are your methods at the time to signify that there's some type of emergency going on.
Yes.
Yeah. It's interesting to try to have somebody in the current generation or in the recruit academies that like you help teach to wrap their mind around that, because that's not a thing anymore. You know,
Right.
Sure, radio systems can go down, like you can default back to some of these, but to say like that's how you communicated those emergencies is so far removed from what people know now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's and it's a good thing. I hope that the folks today continue to advance so that 40 years from now, people are looking back going, you did what? Just because you had an emergency button on the radio. There's going to be some other means.
Yeah, right.
Whatever it may be. But it's important to understand that, if nothing else, to also understand that some of those, while they might not be your primary method, if your radio goes totally out, you've got no other means of communication. You need your BA to breathe, and not thinking, wait a minute, you know, this old technique from back in, you know, that they started way before I was ever born.
Yeah, right.
You know, that is another means. So you don't want to forget those far gone basics, because that might be you going, I don't know what else to do.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. I remember some guy telling me, you know, toss my helmet out, and somebody come along and see a helmet, you know.
That's not normal. That should be a
right.
red flag.
So, again, wouldn't use it as my first choice. Still want to keep all my gear with me.
Yeah.
But understanding some of those, if you lose some of your other capabilities, they are still there.
Yeah.
And
sure.
making people be aware of what this means, as opposed to, there's somebody's helmet off at 7, I'll just go take that and throw it on the engine.
Right. Right. Dig into that.
Right.
See what's going on there. So you've made it on. So you've made it down to the ground. You're conscious. I guess let's get into some of the more, medical side, for lack of better words of it.
So I'll tell you a little humorous story. Part of that at the beginning is my partner on the ambulance when I responded. A really good medic, very good medic. She's looking around because she heard there's firefighters heard around back, and she's running around. Where's Wiseman? Where the hell's Wiseman? I need my driver. we got to get around back. We got injured firefighters around back.
Yeah.
She gets around back and she goes, "Oh, there you are."
Yeah, you are
and
the
she
injured
said,
firefighter.
"You know, you're driving the ambulance." So she had a really good sense of humor. We'd known each other for a little while, and she was kind of I don't want to say hard, but she had that grit.
Yeah.
And it was pretty neat. She actually after that she used to start calling me Crispy.
Oh, jeez.
So other people were like, what? And I'm like, no, man, I understand. You know, we were on that incident together, and we were through all that together. And to us, that was just
that's cool.
That was a little joke. So, so she was looking for me. Where the hell am I? And I'm the one of the ones around back that needed the ambulance. So.
Yeah, right.
So we're around back. Myself and Mike had about, I think he was around 20% second and third degree burns plus respiratory burns. I was 30% second and third degree burns. Excuse me. My hands were degloved. My fingers were degloved. They took us both to Howard County General. We were there for a while. Another somewhat humorous component was we're getting ready to get flown out. We've been there for a while now, at least 20 minutes, because it takes that long for a helicopter to get there. So we've probably been there 20, 30 minutes at least. And I hear them talking about flying us out and taking us to the burn center, which I figured that was going to be the case. And so now they're getting ready to take us out to the landing pad, and says, "Okay, we're going to take you." I said, "Question." And actually, one of Kevin Aftong, who worked for the fire department at the time, also worked part-time at the hospital. Okay. So I asked him, I said, "Hey, Kevin, do I get any pain medicine?" He said, he's like, "Oh, well, you weren't complaining about anything." And he said, "So I guess it got overlooked." I'm like, I wouldn't mind having a little bit.
I've heard a little bit right now, yeah.
So he's like, oh, okay. So that was kind of, I was almost got flown out and they didn't even give it any thought. So if you want pain meds, complain a little bit. If you try to buckle it under and don't say anything, then they just don't give you anything.
Right. Anything 20 minutes at least now post-incident, that adrenaline's wearing off.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that pain's setting in pretty good now.
Yep. Yeah. And I heard, and I knew most of their efforts were dealing with Mike.
Okay. Because of the tracheal burns.
Yeah, and I didn't know to the extent of that. I just knew that I could hear him yelling some, and I could hear him. I think at some point I might have heard somebody say that they were tubing him. I can't remember. But I for whatever reason, there was something that they either said or things going on. I knew that there was a lot of attention going to his room. So, then, so they flew us out from Howard after just their basic burn treatment in Howard. Flew us out. Again, it wasn't the nice A139, I think it is, that they run now. It was a Bell Jet Ranger. If anybody wants to look that up on Google that on the internet so they can see what kind of helicopter that is. They stack you on a rack, one over top of the other on backboards. There's no treatment provided when you're going in a Bell Jet Ranger. There's only enough room for the other person to sit next to you, but they can't provide any treatment. It's tight.
Wow. You're just getting a ride.
Yes. So, and the other backboard is about 6 inches off of your nose. So I was on the bottom, Mike was over top of me. And so you're like 6 inches from nose to the bottom of the other backboard. And another humorous part there was we're going in there, the medic on the helicopter is telling us the landmarks as we fly over the city.
Oh, wow.
So he says, that little blue light down there, that's the aquarium. I wear glasses. My glasses, I didn't have them.
Yeah, right.
They're back in the ambulance. So I'm just going, yeah, okay, if you say so.
Yeah, right.
I really couldn't see it, but thanks for appreciate I do appreciate the tour. So we flew into the burn center, which is it's actually in a different building, same campus, what we now refer to as Bayview. Mm-hmm. Used to be referred to Baltimore City Hospital Center, and it was the Baltimore Regional Burn Center.
Okay.
It was so we flew in there. I'm not sure if they always do it or not, but the other thing that I always remembered was when they went to land, it felt like we hit a brick wall. I think he basically came in and turned the helicopter 180 before he went on the helipad, and I guess we just do that very quick. It felt like we hit a brick wall. But so get to the burn center, take us in. I guess we got there, and I'm just ballparking this. It seemed like we got to the burn center maybe around 9:30. I just remember it was late. It's summertime, so it was already dark when we got there. Yeah. So a lot of that time factor and how long we were at the hospital, how long it took us to get there, and that kind of thing, I'm not sure. I just know it was late when we got to the burn center, relatively speaking, and got to the burn center, and they go through their entire routine of taking off everything that they put on at Howard.
Yeah. Okay.
You do. And you can jump in here anytime you want to, or cut me off.
Yeah, no, please, keep driving.
They do debriding, and as I've told everybody, if getting burned is the easy part, the treatment is the tougher part. Yeah. When they do the debriding, they're basically taking off the old, the burned skin, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So they do that, cover you up with Silvadene, which is the greatest thing in the world.
Okay.
It's this cream that has a silver content to it as well. Prevents infection, and it covers everything. When they put that on, the nicest thing about that is it protects all the nerve endings from the atmosphere and everything.
Okay.
So that's why I say it's the greatest thing in the world, because when they put that on and wrap the bandages on, it's like, okay, I feel normal again. I'm going to go home now. I mean, it makes a big difference once you get everything covered back up with the Silvadene and wrapped. And got to our room. I don't know what time that was. It was really late. We get into our room. They put us together in the same room, which was nice. And then I guess the next notable thing, I had one humor thing in there, things you don't see nowadays. So my parents are at the hospital at the burn center, and when they were getting ready to leave that night, they actually put the backboards in the back of their station wagon and dropped them back off at Station 7.
Oh, jeez.
So we didn't have the mail run person, whoever does it, makes the hosptal runs, picks up. That didn't happen. They didn't have that back then. So they, my dad's like, hey, we'll take them back to the firehouse for you. So that was kind of funny. There's actually even a note in the logbook. I've got copies of the pages out of the logbook, and there's actually a note in the logbook, and I forget what time it was. It was like 12:30 or 1 o'clock in the morning. Something that says either Wiseman's parents or Mr. Wiseman or something returned backboard to fire station. So that was kind of funny. So
and you don't get debrided once, right?
No, that's every day.
Every day.
Every morning. So and that went on for I guess it was 2 weeks, close to 2 weeks, until I had so they did that. Then I got skin grafts. So
2 weeks later.
So 2 weeks into, and part of that was extended because I got they had us on IV antibiotics.
Okay.
And I had a reaction to nafcillin, which was the antibiotic they had in the IV.
Okay.
So not a serious reaction. I had a rash after a few days. I developed a rash. Well, they wouldn't do the grafts while I had the rash, so I had to wait for that to go away because again, that's all skin related.
Yeah. And
they need the skin in the healthy state of kin so that when they put the grafts on, that got delayed a week. So they did us both at the same time. But that was best I can recall. It was 2 weeks into. It might have been a week and a half. But it was so you go through debriding every day for a week and a half to 2 weeks.
Okay.
Back up from one more humor moment. The first morning, wake up and they bring breakfast into you, and she sets the tray in front of me, and she said, "Here's your breakfast." Well, my hands are totally bandaged, fingers individually, but everything's bandaged up, and so I was like, well, what am I supposed to do here? And some people think this is mean, but she really meant it in a positive way. She said, which got to really know the nurses well. They're awesome down there.
Yeah.
She said, "You're burned. You're not crippled." Mm. And I said, "Huh?" And she said, "This is the start of your physical therapy. It's not just physical therapy sessions. You got to be able to function and do everything that you could do before. And this is day one. We're going to start getting you back that way." So she said, "Here, I'll help you out." And she opened up the plasticware that's in the little plastic baggie.
Yeah.
Because with bandages on, and
that would have been frustrating.
Yeah, I was like this, and nobody can see what I'm. Your fingers are just slipping off of the plastic baggie. So she did open my plasticware for me.
Okay.
So I learned how to open a milk container and juice container with my bandages on and everything, and that's how you start your therapy to get back to.
It's those little things
back to functional. They want you to be moving and things like that. So
healthy dose reality.
Yes. So they're awesome. But so getting back on track to the other. So debriding, week and a half into it, say a week and a half, 2 weeks. They did skin grafts for my arms and my thighs. And one item too to kind of let folks in on turnout gear wise, going back to the very beginning, is we wore 3/4 boots frequently, not turnout pants. With 3/4 boots, you have that opening at the top, and for anybody who's so young that they don't know what 3/4 boots are, think of fishing boots, hip waders. So you have a gap at the top that allows heat and the environment to get into it. So that's kind of how my legs were burned, were kind of in V patterns from from like the hip down toward my knee. Is how that, so from the heat coming in from the top of the boot. So skin grafts, arms and legs. You come back, you get they put you on what they call a clinitron bed. It has a lot of silicone beads in it, and it's it's an air bed, but it also has these beads in it that are constantly going around to help stimulate your body surface so you don't get bed sores, things like that.
Interesting. Okay.
Because you can't move around a whole lot when you have the grafts, and you can't have pressure on the grafts because they need blood flow coming to them.
Yeah.
And I'm not even going to attempt to go into the science of this bed, but it's an air bed of sorts, but it's not like an air mattress.
Yeah. Right.
The way it's designed, there's never any constant pressure on any part of your body, so that the grafts can heal. It's pretty neat. If anybody's interested, you'd have to look it up on the internet. I can't.
Yeah.
That's my short explanation of how that works. So we're on clinitron beds. You do that. Once you get the grafts and they bandage them on, then you can't do the things that you were doing before. They don't want you moving because the grafts, they're not stitched on. They're just the grafts are simply laid on the area and then bandaged over, and then they have to themselves bind and adhere to the underlying skin layers. So you can't move your arms. They actually have it. So I couldn't bend my elbows, couldn't bend my arms. So people have to feed you for a little while. Man. So another humor point. Retired Frank Rommel, who and I had come in as volunteers together. He came into the hospital, and him and Alan Conway are two of the ones I remember a lot. Came in, and he's feeding me. So of course the first day he comes in, he's got to be the fire department funny guy, as we always treat each other with the utmost respect and courtesy.
Right.
And he said, "Okay, here comes the airplane." He said, "No, you got to make the airplane sound, or I'm not going to give you any food." So that was
good old Chief Rommel.
Yeah. So it keeps your spirits, and I will say, without trying to go off track, I appreciated people that came in and still talked to me and treated me just like we were sitting there having a conversation.
Yeah.
And not, "Hey, how you doing? Are you okay?" That kind of real, that to me, I just talk to me, joke around with me. If you want to ask me how I'm feeling, that's fine, but don't make it seem like it's,
No, I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think all too often it's like, we treat you like it's a little bit of otherism, right?
Yeah.
Like you're now different, but I'm the same guy. I'm just a little beat up right now.
Sure.
So just treat me like the same guy.
Yep.
I really appreciate that.
And so I appreciated that they did that, and they didn't treat me any different than they would have if I'd been at the station. So that was good. So go through the grafting process. After about, I'm ballparking this, I'd say after about a week, probably after a week and a half, then they, after a week they rebandage you. So you stay in the bandage that they put on you that initial time. They don't mess with anything for a week, and they have to keep them damp, which is or moist, which probably that was probably one of the other than the debriding, that's definitely the most uncomfortable. Yeah. They put a heat shield over top of your bed to project heat onto you, because your arms and my legs were always damp because the bandages are moist.
Okay.
And if you've ever sat around in a wet T-shirt, you can be in the warmest room there is, and you're still going to feel chilly because of that, the evaporation aspect and the
temperature.
So they put a heat shield over you. That was the part that, if you will, was uncomfortable, because you always just felt cool. So for a week, you kind of always felt chilly.
Yeah.
But
you're just not, this whole process, you're not comfortable. There's no part of this where you're like, I feel really good right now. Yeah.
So So after about a week, they take those dressings off and they put new dressings on, and then you're allowed to bend your arms and do some things at that point. And then it's so 2 weeks after the grafts was when they do an evaluation. We were allowed to be released to go home, and then they also fit you for what they call Jobst sleeves, Jobst. They're like really tight pantyhose.
That's like the compression sleeves.
Yes, compression sleeves. And they put them on. That keeps the pressure on the grafts so that they don't, and the burns so that they don't heal upward, because actually once you get burned, your skin actually heals faster than the surrounding skin can accept it. So what happens, that's where if you see people who have had burns and it's kind of mounded up, that's because that's what the Job's garment prevents or attempts to prevent. So that it keeps the pressure on it so that it doesn't mound up as a scar and it heals outward.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So they give you, and you get a new pair of them about every 2 weeks, because over time they stretch out. So you wear them, and you wear them for, I wore them probably a year.
Yeah.
So that's not a short-term thing either. You get used to them after a while. It's just,
It's another layer of clothes.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it actually, when I stopped wearing them, my clothes felt odd, because that's the first time in a year my clothes had actually been moving on my skin. Wow. And it's kind of, it's just that sensation of, you just were consciously aware of your clothing, which was really strange. So you wear them for a year, and limit sun exposure for a year. Obviously, the Jobs help prevent that, but the sun exposure, the ultraviolet exposure, and then I guess it was a year. That was July. So just about a year. I think I came back to work full duty in June of the following year. And in order to do that, again, some of these things, we didn't have evaluation processes in place back then. So the doctor said, okay, after about a year, should be, heat resistance should be normal to what the other skin, your other skin is. So that's what so when they approved me to go back, I guess you would say from a medical aspect, then so I had to go to a house burning and run through a house burning, which we did with real houses.
I say it like it's funny.
And we burned real houses back then. And for anybody who knows Chief Freeze was the one overseeing it. They happened to have, to my benefit, there happened to be, around that same time, there was a basic fire class, which is what we called Fire 1 and Fire 2 back then. And Chief Freeze was the instructor. And so I went to that house burning. And I'll just say Chief Freeze built some really good fires. He was notorious. People knew his, So anyhow, so I went through a normal operational run twice of, go find the fire, put it out, that kind of thing. And then, and part of that was, it was two part. One part is, which I always figured the first part is how I look at it, is the first part was the mental aspect of, can you go in, find a fire, be in a smoky atmosphere, find a fire, do your job, put it out mentally. Are you okay to do that?
Sure.
And then after I ran that twice, and he said, how you feeling? I said, yeah, I'm feeling good. And he said, okay, well then, the rest of the day, just stay in here and stoke fires with me. So it was kind of like the first part, as I look at it, the first part was the mental aspect of, can you go in and do it?
Yeah. And
then the second part was, can you withstand the heat? Environment, and part of that is also mental. When it starts getting warmer, you're going to go, okay,
this is weird. Yeah.
So the one thing I will say, and I don't recommend anybody to go out and get burned to find this out, but if there's one benefit from getting burned, to me was, and some people think this sounds odd when I say it, I know how hot is now.
Yeah.
And I know where that limit is, where I can say, I've felt this before. I know what level I'm at and where we are, and we either need to, no, we're not going any further than this, we're backing out, or I don't recommend anybody finding out that way. But that was, if there was one benefit to the getting burned, is I had that thermometer now ingrained in me that I knew what it felt like at different points, that I would know this is a cutoff point.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we went through the house burning and did that was my evaluation as to whether or not I was okay to go back on the job. Chief Freeze said, yeah, at the end of the day, he said, you good? I said, I'm good. He says, I'm fine with the way you worked today. So I guess like a week later,
you're back
I
on
was
the
back
floor.
in the field.
After a year, essentially, of rehab and work on that. Wow. And how long were you in the actual burn unit itself?
For a month.
1 month, yeah. So 1 month in the burn unit, and then another 11 months, essentially, of healing, going through that, and then you're back on the floor.
Yep.
And then once back on the floor, when that first box alarm or working fire drops, was there any apprehension? Or did you feel, after going through the training, where you're like, no, I feel like I'm back in the saddle?
No, I felt, not that I remember. Mm-hmm. I think a big part of it, as much as it may have seemed non-scientific as far as the way they went about it, I think the way my process of being evaluated to come back in, I think helped me, because the first time we got a call actually wasn't the first time. That time that Chief Freeze, did that. And I'll qualify that it wasn't just when he would run fires, you would do it as you would respond to a fire. So they would set it, you'd go down the street on the engine and sit and wait on the engine, come down. So the entire process was run through as if it were an incident.
They kept it as
and
real
I think
as possible.
that probably was, I never consciously gave that credit for that. I never really thought about, why was I fine when I went into the next working fire? But looking back, it probably is attributed to what the department at that time used as an evaluation method, because you were able to run through an incident, so to speak.
Sure, kept it as real as possible,
right.
And it's probably those soft data points that you weren't even realizing, subconsciously working, made it as real as possible. You made it as normal as possible.
Yeah.
And you got back in the saddle a lot cleaner.
So and I guess one of the questions I've had people ask me, have you ever had, did it bother you, or I think actually it was the last academy class, this previous one just a month ago when I was talking to the class about Maydays, one of them asked me, did you have any lingering psychological, problems or anything with that? And I really, I never really did. And I think, and this is not me speaking, this is the doctor from the burn center, and I don't know if he's even qualified to make the judgment, but his position on was that because he and I would talk a lot, he was a pretty cool guy, and he'd ask about the call, and after it was done, he said, you know what, everything you've told me, you worked through that entire incident, through the entire event, you continued to work to either affect the rescue on your partner or affect your own survival.
Yeah.
And he said, and that's probably why, because if you had sat down in a corner somewhere and just given up and said, and that's what you had done, he said, then it probably would have. But the fact that you were consciously working, the whole time you were thinking about how do I get out of this situation, and you were working through it and not allowing something to take you over.
Yeah.
That was his opinion as to why, and it seems to make sense to me. I'm in no way am I a psychologist, psychiatrist, or anybody.
No, I really like that though. I feel like there's validation there, and I've heard that from other people. Like there's not really a question as to whether or not you had the mettle. You handled it a really incredible situation. Multiple firefighters jumping out of windows. You knew that you can sleep soundly at night knowing that you're not leaving your partner behind. You made 3 more checks in a room that you couldn't control the door in, advanced fire conditions. So your emotional mindset and the tactical acumen was validated, even for a guy that had 5 years to include volunteer time, and only 3 weeks on the professional side. there's validation there. So I think that does help you rest a little bit easier at night. I think that's really important.
Yeah. So, and if that's the case and that's what it was, that's great. I always kept that as something I would look back on, both for me and also teaching other people. You know, whether it just be on shift training or something like that, is always being there, being prepared to work through the problem.
Yeah.
And know your options and pull on those things that you learn, because the old saying, you rise to the occasion, and that's actually not true. You'll fall back on whatever level of training and knowledge that you have retained.
The basics, yeah.
You're not going to pull something out of the hat.
Yeah.
I won't say there isn't the one rare person that pulls something out of a hat.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, in survival situations, you don't pull something out of the hat. You're using your database.
Exactly.
Of knowledge, and if you haven't kept up on that,
and if you've challenged that database, you can, advance the baseline and the fundamentals that you fall back on. But that's exactly what it is. It's what you have made ingrained in you, because otherwise it's perishable. I think the research is pretty clear on that. So you nailed it. Absolutely nailed it.
It's funny. I was having a discussion with my wife last night. We were watching. There's a show on called Crisis Point. If anybody has, it's actual real incidents that police and firefighters have gone through.
Okay.
But there was one incident, and she was asking me, well, would you have done different, or how would he have known to do something different? I think was the question.
Sure.
And I said, it's not that you can't be in the incident prior, and it's not what you decide to do with your training at that time. You have to plan for that incident before it even happens.
Ahead, yes.
You have to play those games, and I know you've done it, and I hope others do it as well. Is you have to do the what ifs. Let's create an incident in our head. What if this happened? Because if we can think of it, it can indeed happen.
Yeah.
And that's how we do plan, so that we're not making up that decision you're activating it, if you will, in a split second.
Yeah.
The decision was made 6 months before that when you were training on how to deal with that. And I think that's important for people to understand, is that split second decision. I'd almost prefer to call it the split second action.
Yes.
Based on the decision I made 2 months ago, a year ago, whatever it was when I trained for that.
I completely agree. And that goes back to, planning ahead, sure, but visualization and visualization drills. If you can dream it up, I'm not a fan of hellfire and brimstone scenarios where everything comes crashing down on you. But if it's realistic enough for you to think about, train on it. And the first time you feel and experience it, ideally, is not on the fire ground.
Right.
And
a lot of those come from, we don't even have to use, unfortunately, a whole lot of imagination sometimes if we just read line of duty death reports.
Yes.
And if we read those other incidents, say, what happened in that incident? Okay, now let's put ourselves in that incident.
Yep.
And let's, not only do we learn from it, but that's how we make sure they didn't lose their life in vain, by making sure that we don't do that again. Lawrence
Gonzalez in Deep Survival says, commune with the dead. It's unfortunate, but we can glean a lot from it, and then we can create training from that. So you're back on the firehouse floor. You're running calls. You feel good about it. We talked about training. Unless there's anything else, mindset-wise, of getting back in there that stuck out to you.
No, I think we're good to move. We can move on.
Yeah. Okay. I know you got a good section on lessons learned.
Yes. So. Probably main ones, and it's interesting when I every time I go out and talk with the academy classes, that reminds me of some of the lessons learned, and I find new ones and go, oh, you know what? I didn't really think about that. So, but probably the first one that stands out is I always made a point to check doors if I needed to use the door at the time.
Yeah.
Or if I found a door that was closed and I went into that room, I would close the door when I came out, so that I would remember in my mental mapping, there were two closed doors and then I got to an open door, that kind of thing. So from that aspect, or on a vent enter search situation. But in the routine, going down a hallway to go in a room to search it, when I first went into the room to search a room, just like I did that day, I would go in. If the door was open, I wouldn't really give much thought to the door other than, checking behind it. But as far as the function of the door and will it close all the way and that kind of thing, because I didn't need the door to get in the room and there wasn't a hazard while I was in the room, I almost ignored the door, if you will.
Yeah.
After that, every time I went into a room, I would check and make sure the door, the function of the door, that I could close it all the way. So that if I needed to close that door, I knew going into the room, I didn't find out at the time that I needed the door. Oh, now I got to dig it out from a bunch of stuff. So I would say check those door functions was a lesson to me, regardless of whether or not at the time I even need to use the door for what my task is.
Yeah.
The overall big one, not necessarily just to me, but to everybody, is we can't go. They teach them in the academy. You can't go anywhere without a buddy. You can't go to the bathroom. You can't do anything.
Right.
If there's a Mayday, there's always potential, a great potential that there's two people involved in that Mayday. Mm-hmm. Keep the Mayday firefighter abreast of their partner's status. And that's what played big into mine was every time I came to that window and I wanted to know where Mike is. Nobody would give me that information, not just because they couldn't hear me, but nobody's thinking that. They're thinking, you're in trouble. We know where Mike is.
Yeah, right.
So you need to come down. But if you're in that situation, and speaking from being in that situation, I'm not going to leave my partner behind.
Yeah.
The information I need, because I'm at the window, I can figure out how to get out. The information I need to know the status of my partner so that I can come out.
Yeah.
I can physically come out, but mentally I'm not coming out unless you give me that answer. Sure. So I would say make sure you keep the firefighter, the Mayday firefighter, abreast of their partner status. And in some cases, it might just mean one statement. He's out. Now let's focus on you. Okay,
yeah.
Understand that. I did have a question, and a very valid question, from one of the academy class students one time, and they asked me, they said, what if the Mayday firefighter's partner is deceased? And I said, you can still give a status without giving them information that could be detrimental to them at that time. Yeah. And I said something as simple as, we've got personnel with so-and-so.
Yeah.
Or just, there's ways that you can say, just like we would say to a person in a car accident, if there's a bad outcome with somebody else in a vehicle.
Yeah, sure.
But make them aware that you know what's going on with their partner.
Yeah.
Because then they can focus on them getting themselves out, as opposed to, I'm not leaving. You can tell me all day long what you want me to do, but if my partner's not out, I've got a rescue to make.
Yes. And
that was my mindset, and I believe that would be other firefighters' mindsets as well, is I've got a job to do. I know you got a job to do to try to find me. I've got a job to do to get my partner.
Yeah. And I think, I don't mean to speak too far out of turn here.
No,
I mean, granted, the technology and era is a little different now. Communication on that side hopefully is easier for us. But even in that instance, if there's a breakdown, would it have helped to have somebody actually just climb the ladder and yell out the window? Like, we know we have him. Get the hell out.
Sure. Yep.
Like, I mean, I don't mean to simplify it that much, but maybe it could be that simple.
Yes. Yes, it could have been.
Do that extra little bit of work to just boogie up the ladder and grab you by the shoulder and say, no, we have him.
Right. We got Mike.
Get out. Yeah.
Yep. Something as that simple would have done it.
Yeah.
Again, same kind of thing with people talking about Mike going out. I don't hold that against anybody because you don't know what you don't know.
Yes.
And people hadn't been exposed to that kind of an incident, many of them before.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm not sure if there had been any in the department prior to that of something similar to our incident.
Sure.
So do that. The other one, we talked about the deck. We didn't know there was a deck below us. Mm-hmm. That kind of goes hand in hand with 360s, which was that was the beginning of the change in our department to do 360s regardless of how big the area was or how much time it would take to get somebody on a 360. But knowing where the deck is, I couldn't see the deck. We hadn't done a 360, so I hadn't seen it from the outside. There was smoke. I couldn't see it from the inside. Neither could Mike. Making that statement and I emphasize, and this is something that came from high-rise incidents because the levels are different, or there might be floor numbering disparities. But reporting a deck down from the roof because everybody can see the roof. Mm-hmm. If you let somebody know there's a deck 2 stories down from the roof, 2 floors down from the roof, everybody can do their own math and figure that out, and they know. So make sure they know there's a deck, where it is. I encourage people to do it down from the roof and don't say on the main floor, because coming from the front, coming from the back, the main floor may be different.
Then you need to be able to intelligently say what the main floor is also.
Yes. Yes, identifying the floors from the start. We've had to change on incidents and let people know that that's not the basement, that's the first floor, because it's on a slab, and people are referring to an incident as a basement kind of thing.
Yeah, but generally speaking, the roof line or gutter line generally is a fixed location you can see from all sides. There's always some caveat there, but I like that. Yeah.
So that was important, and don't leave out whether or not it's accessible from the ground. That makes again,
that's a big deal. Yeah.
Ladders, who can, it's more critical to those coming around to get up than those coming down.
Yeah.
I'd like to have steps going down, but if I'm in a 3-story townhouse and I can hang and drop to one level, I can hang and drop another level. It's only one level each time. So for me, but I don't know if anybody has physically done it or they just sit there and do the drawing on paper, but you'll find out the angle of a ladder and whether or not a 35 can actually hit the roof of a townhouse with a deck sticking out. Right. It can't make it to the second floor window, I can tell you that right now. Yeah. So anybody wants to challenge that, feel free, but without bending the ladder, you won't be able to make that second floor. So think about that when you are laddering. Let somebody know if you make let them know the access and the location, so that the crews bringing ladders could say, "Oh, wait a minute, he just said there's no access. We need at least one roof ladder in that group, and we need at least 2 ladders to affect the process." So, again, and communication is great nowadays because we have radios. Yeah. I give a lot of credit, like I said, to the firefighter that came around back with the roof ladder because he did that double throw, and then somebody else ended up coming around with a ladder to make up the difference by the time we came out.
Great, yeah.
So, you see, I mentioned 360s. Some of the other, be aware of the changing conditions and respond to them. Don't assume somebody else is going to deal with it. And what I mean by that is if you're on the second floor and the heat starts building up, don't go, they're working on the first floor. Yeah. Just keep going. Yeah. Again, and a lot of that goes back to communication too. We didn't have it then, but communicating now. Hey, let the first floor know. Hey, what do you got going on down there? Because we're getting a lot of heat build up on the second floor. Does 2 things. One, it lets them know what your situation is. It also might let them know that they're not hitting the fire. They might even think they are. Right. That's happened, many times, is the fire you see and what you think it is, but you don't realize it's traveling another avenue. Yeah. And realizing that you're not making that effect. So, so processing those effects. Now, it happened pretty quick on ours. Like I said, it was seconds. But if you start noticing that, make that known. Don't keep it to yourself.
And like you said, you had 3 things hit you at once with the burn through hose line, the flow path, and the kitchen floor giving way to give it even more of an open flow path. So, I mean, when it rains, it pours, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect storm. So, as far as, if you will, departmental lessons learned was accountability systems. That's actually when we started, as a result of that incident, is when we started working toward, and we've evolved it through a number of them. But shortly after that, it came to a minimum of, on a piece of paper, writing down what crews were where, because at the time, nobody knew who was where. Yeah. Crews were assigned to go in. When they say I had to have firefighters in the back, they didn't know who they were because nobody knew exactly where our assignments were. So if you talk to the officer that sent that specific person, he might go, well, I sent them to the second floor, but nobody else in the fireground knew. Yeah. There wasn't a single point. If a tree fell on that officer, then it's gone. all that information's gone. So from the lessons learned departmentally, that was one of them, was accountability systems. Communications was realized, and that was the start of increasing. We went to 2 portables on the apparatus, and for a long time that's all we had, but at least that gave one to the officer, and then the crew that would be on the line, which at that time we had, if you had 4 people on the engine, you were really, it was a big day.
Good. Yeah, right.
So at a minimum, for the most part, you had contact with everybody. With that size of a crew, you had contact with everybody, and that was probably over a period of 2 years following that, they were able to affect that. And as we all know, there's money involved.
Oh, for sure.
So radios were expensive then, just as like they're expensive now. So dealing with budgets, but over a period of about 2 years following that incident, it got to the point where there was at least 2 portables on every piece of apparatus as a result of that. Basement access. Mm-hmm. Big one. Back when that happened, it was unheard of. And I know some people don't buy into it today, but everybody makes their choices. It was unheard of back then to go in through a neighboring townhouse that wasn't involved, nice clean carpet, and go in through their front door, out their back door, and back in the back door of the house that's on fire.
Sure.
That is a viable technique. Yeah. Depending on where that middle of the group townhouse is, I'm sure other jurisdictions have them. There's several in Harris County that are up to 8 townhouses long.
Oh, yeah.
Excuse me.
There's some good setbacks.
So it's, it used to be 5.
Yeah.
was the max. That was a row of townhouses. Now there's 8. I don't know if there's any longer than that in the county, but I know there's several 8s. And some of those 8s aren't our typical townhouses. They're the 3,000 square foot townhouses. They probably have some fancy name other than calling them a townhouse now, because nobody wants to call a townhouse a row house. So I'm sure the people that have the 3,000 and 5,000 square foot ones don't want to call them townhouses.
Yeah, right.
So, but it's a significant run to go all the way around.
Yes.
That it is a viable avenue to go through a neighboring townhouse and then back in, and keeping that open. Back then, we traditionally went on every basement fire the same way. Unless for some reason you happen to approach and where you parked, you happen to went, oh, there's a basement door there. If we were on side alpha, we went down the basement steps.
Yeah,
that's
what you did.
And so that was a change. As far as departmental change, that's probably the big ones. The 360s, the communication, and the access accountability systems. Those were probably the big departmental changes. Takeaways that I try to pass on to people is and a big one is mental mapping. I know you've talked to folks about mental mapping, and everything inside that building is part of the map. And if you move something, you have to move it with a purpose, and you have to remember what that move was, because that may be your avenue of getting back out of someplace.
Yeah.
When I was going through the room, interestingly, there are a couple pieces of furniture that stick out in my mind, and I still remember them. There was a some type of a dresser type unit. And actually, I'm sitting here looking at the one behind you in your in the room here. And I'll tell you right now, I never actually saw it because of how much smoke was there. I just know from my feel of it that it was kind of similar to the hutch that you have behind you, but had a lower level opening to one of the things. But I remembered where that was, and every time I searched the room, when I got to that, I knew that I had completed the room.
Right.
So that piece of furniture stuck out to me. Excuse me. The bed that I had to go over top of every time, I remembered where that was in the room. Mm-hmm. So those landmarks, if I had gone in like a bull in a china shop and just started knocking things around, I would not have had those landmarks. Landmarks that not only told me I searched the room, but likely landmarks that allowed me to continue to get back to the window when I needed to get back to the window. So,
and an otherwise tough landscape anyway, being a hoarder house.
Yes.
So those two landmarks are huge.
Yep.
Yeah.
So if you move something, move it with a purpose. Remember where you moved it to. Just don't knock stuff out of the way, because is it an obstacle or is it a landmark? And that's what I try to tell people is if it's not keeping me from going somewhere and go around it, I'd rather leave it there.
Yes.
So that when I need to get out or I need somebody to come get me, I can tell them, well, this is how I got here.
Yeah. And houses typically are set up for travel and living. So if we are moving things, it's not happening as much, but I still see it with 10, 15-year guys and gals where we're going in for a search drill and it's the bull in the china shop and moving things and couches, and now you're just messing up your egress potentially, because more often than not, rooms are set up so it has a natural flow, right?
Right.
And you're just messing that flow up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then under stress, if you come across one of those areas and you're thinking logically, hey, I came across, a table, a couch, whatever it may be, a chair, a kitchen table, whatever. Logically, I'm thinking where that would be in the house, but now somebody has gone ahead and shoved it.
Yeah.
Can actually be detrimental to me, because now it's changing. I'm trying to think logically how to get out of here, and you've turned it into an illogical arrangement. So, so think about your other folks who got to come in, your other crews. Excuse me. Door swings. I paid a lot more attention to door swings, and what I mean that is, do they swing in or out?
Yeah.
Inward. Swinging into the room is more likely a living area.
Yep.
Could be a walk-in closet, so it's an English rule, not a math rule. For those listening, the English rule: I before E, except after C, except in words like height and weight. Math: 1 + 1 is always 2. It's never going to be 3. So that's so English rule, but on the higher end, closer to a math rule. But if it swings in, it's probably a living space. From the aspect of me and my preservation, is if I have to get out of an area and I hit a door and it's going to swing in, then it's likely a living space. And generally, almost a math rule, living spaces have escapes. I can escape, correct. Could be an older house, could be somebody did a non-permitted area, could be the walk-in closet. So it may not, but oftentimes they're going to have windows, means of escape. So from a preservation perspective, that's always thinking if it opens toward me, it's probably a closet, someplace I don't want to go, those kind of things. So keeping those aware, again, that kind of goes back to checking the door function when you go in. You feel the door, check the function. It also is giving you the answer, is this an inward, outward, what I'm,
Yeah.
So
for sure.
And then it kind of hand in hand with that is the floor coverings. And it was interesting as I talk about this to different people who's going back, and I can actually remember floor coverings in that house years later that I, be quite honest with you, I never even consciously thought about the floor coverings at the time, or years after that, until I started using this more in teaching about Maydays. And I can visualize going down the hallway and going in the rooms and remembering that last bedroom had carpet in it. The upper hallway had carpet in it. The one room, which would have been the bathroom, because it was in between the two. And I remember the in-between room that we checked was tiled. Just remembering that, the type of floor coverings you would have in the different types of rooms in the building. And probably, my key takeaways that I try to make sure that I keep these, and it's not just this incident, but we had 2216 BA back then.
Yeah.
So half hour cylinder, quote unquote, right? Half hour cylinder wasn't a half hour, just like 45-minute an hour cylinders aren't. They're the standard. If anybody wants to, it's really kind of interesting reading. Pull it up, see how they rate cylinders, and it's very interesting. It's actually an at-rest sitting at a table. Breathing rate is how they rate. That's my interpretation of how they have a better way of saying it.
Yeah,
but
right.
That's how they're rated. So that's how that cylinder will last a half hour.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, BA always full. They're NFPA, really nice. They'll allow you 10%. I can't breathe the 10% that's not there.
Yeah.
Anybody wants to do the math? That's 450 psi. Which potentially is 4 minutes, maybe longer.
Yeah.
That's a whole other. That's a whole other story about air consumption but BA full, and every station, at least in Harry County, has the ability to fill their BA in their station.
Yeah.
So there's never, ever a reason to not have a 100% full BA. I can tell you right now that you actually can take it higher than 45.
Yep.
If I remember correctly, 5400 is the resettable, relief valve. I always ran mine to between 48 and 5,000 every time. So if I can squeeze it in there, I'm taking it.
Hell yeah.
So I don't know how long folks can hold their breath, but if they want to just sit at a table and hold it for 4 minutes, it'd be pretty interesting to see.
Time,
so
right?
If I can live 4 minutes longer, and 4 minutes you can do a lot of work in 4 minutes.
Hell yeah.
So
it's life-changing air
yes.
on a fire for sure.
And actually the air consumption goes hand in hand. Physical fitness.
Yep.
I don't need to talk real long about any specifics on that, but maintain your physical fitness from the time you walk in the door until the time you leave. The call that you need, either for yourself or to rescue someone else, whether it be a civilian or one of your partners, doesn't change. It's not different on the first day than it is on the last day. They don't give you any little bit of exception. Oh, wait a minute, that's the old guy? Yeah, no, he's okay. Ma'am, he gets an extra 2 minutes to get to you, because she's not going to appreciate that. So
sure.
You have to maintain that level of physical fitness throughout your career and be able to, as I say, you should be able to pass the entrance physical fitness exam when you leave the job, just as you could on the day you walked in the door.
Yeah.
And I can't take credit for this saying. I don't remember where I heard it, but I tell folks, do you want you to be the one coming to rescue you when you're in trouble? And if you really seriously think about that, and you sit down and go, man, I hope they don't send somebody that's my equivalent, my clone, to come looking for me, because I ain't gonna be able to do it.
Yeah.
And hopefully that resonates in folks' minds, and they think about that deep and hard of, do I want somebody like me? If you're thinking about somebody other than yourself coming to rescue, that means you need to work on something. If you go, man, I sure hope they send so-and-so.
Yeah.
No, you should be thinking, man, I sure hope they send me.
Yes. Be introspective with that. And I can preach on this for, until the cows come home, right? That's something near and dear to me. And kudos to you. You just tossed it up for me. You spent over 40 years in the fire service, and day one, you came in, and the test was different then, but on your last day, in your last year, over 40 years in the fire service, you did the physical.
Right. I was able to pass
test.
the CPAT.
Right. So you preached that and you lived it. After 40 years, still being able to do the test, going into retirement, you can rest easy at night knowing that you held up your end of the bargain. And so I appreciate that. And that's a shining example of what so many people should be doing late in their careers. And even with our line of duty, we had 30-plus year members in the heat of things, holding up their end of the bargain because they did keep up with it. And not everybody can say that. Even 5-year guys, sometimes can't say that. So, hats off to you.
So that's, and hopefully, the mentoring of folks like yourself and others that, understand that will continue that.
Yeah.
Throughout the department. So, and then, one thing I meant to say about the 360s is sometimes we get, make sure you're looking at that from both a rescuer and as a victim perspective. When I say victim, I'm talking about you being the victim.
Yeah.
You being the Mayday firefighter. When you do a 360, don't just be looking at it from where in the house might they be, or where is the fire? It should be, I noticed that's an exit. That's a good escape. That's a problem. Or those are landmarks if I get disoriented. So I think a lot of folks come in looking at 360s as I'm looking at it for the purpose of attacking this building, and not I'm looking at it from the purpose of escaping from this building.
Out of this building. Yeah.
Right. And so that's important.
Yeah.
So, throughout I kind of end it with throughout your career and even beyond your career, always be a student.
Yeah.
You should be learning something from every single call you go on, everything you see, no matter how minor a call is. Your ability just to go inside of a building, you might be on a medical call. That doesn't stop you from learning from that building from the fire perspective as well as the EMS perspective. But you're in the building, that's your opportunity to look around. We don't get to look around houses and buildings, some of them very frequently, especially the residentials, which is a high hazard to us. And I don't know that we always look at it that way. We think of the big commercial building as, if we have a fire in that building, man, that's going to be bad. And that's not where we're losing firefighters.
Yeah.
So when you go on those medical calls, take the opportunity to look around, learn something from that building. The 2-bit fire call, step it up a little bit in your discussion after the call and learn something from it.
Yes.
Learn something from everybody else. Chief of the department can learn something from a rookie, and a rookie can learn something from the chief of the department. So don't ever think that, somebody doesn't have something to offer to you and you don't have something to offer to them.
Yeah.
So be a student.
Yeah. Hell yeah. No, and I appreciate everything you've said. You've always, every time we get to talk about some of the Maydays in our department to the recruit classes, you always get good questions. And to kind of close things out, there are 2 things that stick in my mind that I really cherish that you've talked on. One of them, if you would, talk about the job description analogy, if you would. So my very first supervisor, when I got in the department and my first year and I was having my evaluation, he pulled out the job description for a firefighter and he said, read this. And I'd read it before, but I read it and I read through the whole thing. And he said, okay. He said, if you do absolutely everything in that job description perfectly without a single error through the entire year, you're average. And I've held that with me ever since then. It's one of those things that just stuck with me. And I realized what he was saying was, this is what we expect from you. Yes.
The average firefighter does all these things. You want to be above average, you got to go beyond this. So if you're stopping here, you're not doing your part in advancing and developing your knowledge and your training. This is what we expect.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me. Yeah. So if you do everything in your job description absolutely perfectly, to the T, not a single reprimand, nothing, you're average.
Yeah, pardon my language. I fucking love that. And every time I remember you write it up on the board and you tell the recruits that, I'm probably going to start stealing that.
Feel
if you
free.
don't mind, man. It is what is expected of you, and this is the average. Yeah. Advance that. I love that.
Feel free to use it and call it your own.
Yeah.
I always tell people, if I tell you something and give you don't have credit to yourself, carry on, call it your own. It doesn't, I don't need credit for anything. It's, but yeah, it's interesting how some of those things that you hear, stick with you. And, not only from the aspect of, he's telling me from, an evaluation and administratively, if you will, but also from the practical aspect of it that, we have an obligation.
Yeah.
Not just there. Again, going back to who do you want to rescue you? Do you want the average firefighter rescuing you? Or do you want the one that said, this is really nice, but let me see what's the job description for the next level up? Yeah. Because as a firefighter, I want to do that. Yeah. And every time I do that, I want to be beyond that. So.
Yeah. Advance the expectation, advance what's basic. The other thing I took, so your last assignment, you're the countywide A shift safety officer, and especially post line of duty, we did a lot of work with our SCBA, changing it, modifying it. We talked about the EEC, the emergency escape cylinders, and you played a major role in that. And something that I really appreciated is that you would come in and, where I was at, we were constantly trying to stress the firefighters in a healthy way, push and advance the capabilities of the SCBA and find workarounds to them, because we were just trying to disaster plan and find as many, weeds and nuance as we could. And I remember things got to a point where other parts of the committee would take information and run with it. And they'd say, oh, well, these guys did this or these guys recommended that, so we're going to do this thing. And I remember you would come in and you would find out like, well, hold on, those guys didn't say that. And you would always back up the people that needed to be backed up. So, and I say a couple, and I'm taking this a couple different ways. One is I always appreciated how you would get to the root level of things,
right,
to see how things were built and how discussions evolved, because with that fundamental understanding, then you had a greater idea of where things came from and where they were going and how they grew and got to places, instead of just taking it for a grain of salt.
Right.
And that was a good lesson for me was, well, how did this conversation even get to this point? And having that institutional knowledge was really beneficial. And then you can talk to anybody in the department that worked with you, and beyond a shadow of any doubt, a common thread was, if my employee did the right thing, I will have that employee's back to the end of the days. And people knew that, they felt it, and I saw it for where you had our backs at certain things. So again, a shining example of that. I always appreciated that people felt it, they experienced it, they knew it. And there's no better feeling that when you may be in a tough spot, professionally, personally, administratively, operationally, that if you needed somebody to have your back and it was you're going to be okay. And even if it meant that you, it may slight your name with higher ups, you were at peace with that because you always took care of the person, and you were okay with that. And that's an example that I think a lot more people could follow. So thank you for that.
Sure. Yeah, they do the right thing regardless of the consequences. And some people think that sounds odd, but
yeah,
sometimes when you do the right thing, there are consequences. But
yeah,
you got to do the right thing.
Yeah, that is a super simple way to say it, and it doesn't get any more eloquent than that. So, man, that's a hell of a good place to stop as any. Unless you have any other closing thoughts.
No, I think that's good.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This is always a pleasure. Thanks, Cap.
Awesome. Thank you.